Coming up this week on the Markcast, you are in a safe place. You are in a safe place. I know there have been a lot of emotions swirling surrounding the XFL this week. Leaked team names, delayed event announcements, quarterbacks being allocated, everything else. We are having an all-football therapy session with Mike Mitchell. We are in the trust tree in the nest.
I started feeling... What? What? I thought we were in the trust tree in the nest. Are we not?
We are.
Okay.
We are. It's okay. We are. It's okay. It's okay. Please, continue.
I don't know where I was going with that.
Longtime friend of the show, XFL insider himself, Mike Mitchell, stopping by to chat literally anything and everything about this crazy last 2 weeks of the XFL at this point.
How you treat your fans, how you engage with them, how you make them anticipate, and how you make them excited about your league and your product is important. That's something that the XFL in 2020 succeeded with. That's something that this new group, I know they talked about content creation centers and connecting fans with players and all that. Proof's going to be in the pudding when they eventually lay everything out. It feels like right now they're not 100% full go yet.
Then, commissioner of Fan Control Football, home of the Board Apes Football Club, Ray Austin, stopping by to chat FCF Season 3. Obviously now coming into Season 3, you went from 4 to 8. We're running back 8 teams again this year. Is that the plan?
Maybe.
Oh, that's exciting. And then it's been about a year since we had Scott Radley on the show. Really happy to have longtime CFL correspondent, contributor, radio host, Scott Radley stopping by to chat everything CFL Week 17.
I think it's outrageous that Edmonton right now is dead in the water because they stink. But they're dead in the water, and yet Hamilton and Ottawa, that are the same as them, are still battling potentially for a playoff spot.
Let's try this again. Should be a big show this week, and should have lots of good stuff to talk about next week. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. It has been a whirlwind of a journey since we last spoke last Friday, live streaming, taking listener calls, talking about the leaked XFL team names, not logos. No logos were leaked by the XFL shop, just team names, unlike some YouTube channels would like to promote, but I leaked XFL team names coming out, and we did that whole thing, expected the announcements this week, had all the big local activations happening around Seattle and San Antonio, St. Louis, everything else. Hurricane Ian happening. Thoughts and prayers to everybody affected by that. I've seen horrendous videos online, on Twitter and everything else. So obviously thoughts and prayers for all of that, but really pushed, delayed, postponed everything involved with the XFL, the assumed upcoming team name announcements, and then all of the local activations, as they're calling it, in all the XFL markets. So we're going to have Mike Mitchell on anyway to kind of react to the team names, everything else as you would expect. Still having Mike on this week, really appreciate it. And Mike has told me he has done a lot of digging. He said, Reed, I got three really good, three really good people he's talking to, doing all this stuff. We'll see what scoops Mike Mitchell has been able to dig up. I'm recording this before I talk to Mike here in just a little bit. Mike also just put out an article today corroborating, kind of reiterating that we had posted last night, Max, and I know Mike had helped with Max and others, the list of the 9 XFL team, the XFL quarterbacks that have been studying, training with Jordan Palmer this week. That video came out on Monday. So we have presumably the 9, I wouldn't call them starting quarterbacks. I wouldn't call them even for sure that all of them will be hitting the field or the number one, but at least the first 9 quarterbacks of interest in the XFL. Mike has a list of them that, they could be shifted up or down depending on who, let's say let's say Josh Johnson gets released, whatever, comes back into the XFL. But we'll talk through all of that with Mike, get his thoughts on all the XFL quarterbacks, the XFL team names. Mike said he's digging into some other stuff. And just, I think we just need like a good sit down reflection this week. Lots of emotions going on. We're still talking about the Brahmas. I'm still tweeting about the Tampa Bay Vipers, the Seattle Sea Dragons, everything else. So really appreciate Mike coming on. Really thankful to the team over at Fan Controlled Sports now, with them expanding into basketball, which I'm actually really excited to watch, so I don't have to cover it. I can just enjoy it. I'm not a big NBA fan. I think, when the Sonics come back here, I'll probably check that out, but not the biggest NBA, but I really like the Fan Controlled basketball that's coming. But Fan Control Football Commissioner Ray Austin joining the show today. I have my Bored Apes jersey on, courtesy of listener Van. Hope Van's not so frustrated with me after kind of everything this week. Frustrating week for everybody, but really appreciate the team over at Fan Control Football for doing that, sending Ray our way. They are getting ready for their third season kickoff. Who knew? USFL obviously getting through season 1, XFL now. We're trying to do all this. Fan Control Football just keep on running the race. Really appreciate that. Check out some more Fan Control Football this year. The stuff I saw last year was really enjoyable with that. So really appreciate them. And then Scott Radley stopping by. Scott works for the Spectator. Scott has his own show as well up there in Canada, talking all things CFL, Hamilton's disastrous season, BC Lions, clinching a playoff spot, but not really looking like a playoff team last week. What do we think about that? The broken CFL playoff system and all of that stuff. Scott was on like a year ago, and then he was in Hamilton for the Grey Cup, and then really glad that Scott get him back on the show as well. Never want to forget about the CFL, talking all this XFL stuff, but we're always going to have the CFL content as well. Should be a long one with Mike. I'm going to stop. I'm sure I've rambled long enough right now. Please like and subscribe. So curious enough here. We have our Spring League football, the Spring League Veterans Day Ball. You've seen it. I've showed it on the show. Giving away to our 2,500 subscriber giveaway. So I mailed that ball to a friend of the show, Brian Scott, USFL quarterback for the Stars. He was the MVP of the Spring League twice, won with the Generals and all that. So I mailed the ball to Brian. And Brian goes, hey, like I'm leaving town like tomorrow, so I hope the ball comes. Like, do you know what day it's going to come? I said, well, I think it's supposed to come Wednesday. He goes, perfect. I'm going to be out of town for about 10 days, and then I will, sign the ball, mail it, do all that stuff, get it back to me so I can give it away. Well, so that was whatever last Wednesday, Thursday. Lo and behold, who shows up sitting on Jordan Palmer's couch on Monday in the Instagram video? Friend of the show, Brian Scott. So there you go. Kind of put those pieces together as well, because people, when the video first came out, people were like, is that Brian Scott? I'm like, that is 100% Brian Scott, because I know that Brian's out of town because he, with all that stuff. So I presume the Palmer stuff is kosher with the XFL. I think they would have told him to take that down. So I think that's fun to see that, DeAndre Francois and all that as well. Ryan Willis. Sure, we'll talk about that stuff with Mike. But anyway, like and subscribe. Get your chance to get the 2,500 subscriber giveaway, the Spring League football. I got my Spring League jerseys as well. I'm sure I'll be giving away. And then I just got an email. Huge guest 2 weeks from now. Huge guest. I'm going to tweet it out here the second I'm recording this, but teaser anyway for that. But huge guest, 2 weeks, a long time coming. Should be a good one. Take care. Well, we're in therapy session today. The episode this week is an alt football therapy session. We have Dr. Mitchell here. Mike Mitchell, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Reed. Thanks for having me on.
First off, we could start in a multitude of directions. Crazy week, quarterbacks coming out, team names, not logos, team names coming out. I want to point that out. Everything else. Where do you want to stop down and start this crazy conversation?
We got so much to cover. So I'm assuming people are not listening to this to hear me talk about the Argos and the CFL season, which is going great, by the way. We'll get into that another day. But Argos and Leos are going to play in a couple of weeks, so I'm sure we'll have some trash talk going on between the both of us when Vernon Adams straps it up against the Argos in Toronto. But yeah, we can start wherever you'd like, Reed. There's so much to cover right now. Obviously, I released an article today. This will air on Friday on the XFL quarterbacks, the assignments that I've heard through sourcing, where these quarterbacks are going to be landing. We know the first 9. That's not to assume that other quarterbacks weren't at the QB Summit with Jordan Palmer and that they're just not in these videos. But we can cover that. That's a fascinating topic because, we focus on team names, colors, uniforms, all that fun stuff that people like to hone in on when these leagues come out. It's like one of the more exciting things for fans to focus in on. But at the end of the day, the players that play in the league are going to determine how good the XFL is. And, it all starts and ends with the quarterback position.
Yeah, so let's start there, I guess, and then we'll go back because that just came out, and you said you have an article coming out with the team names. We'll stop that on that. I mean, obviously, that's been the topic of topic du jour for a while, but Jordan Palmer, Monday night, Max sends me, you got to go on this Instagram, and I assume this is all kosher because I would imagine they would have deleted this or taken it down, right? But we had the sweeping showing the 9 quarterbacks sitting on the couch. We secured that all week, kind of figured out who all was a part of that. I thought it was funny that I had a friend of the show, Brian Scott. I had mailed him the football to sign as a giveaway item. And he goes, "Hey, Reed, I'm going to be out of town for a little while. I'll get the ball with you when you go back." I go, "Oh, there's Brian. There's Brian sitting on the couch with Jordan Palmer." So you've released the 9 quarterbacks. Now, we figured it all out all week. You have the information. Talk me through the 9 quarterbacks that we have currently and what the situation is with them being like assigned or allocated to the teams.
Right. So it's a fascinating process that's going on right now between the XFL and their players, and the players have been communicating with. So I've seen some reports out there. Shout out to XFL Analyst, who's been putting out reports about letters of intent. I've heard templates for standard contracts will be given out to players that they're not legal documents yet. So I don't know for sure who's signed and who hasn't in terms of who's locked in with the league. But we know the names: Juwan Pass, former Louisville Prairie View quarterback. From what I've heard, he's going to be assigned to the San Antonio franchise with Hines Ward and Jamie Elizondo, who's part of the XFL back in 2020 with Tampa, CFL coach as well. With DC, with Reggie Barlow and his crew, this is an exciting player. Derek King, former Miami Hurricane star, Houston Cougars guy, 5'9", undersized, very Kyler Murray-esque. Ironically, broke a lot of the records Kyler Murray had in Texas there. So Kyler Murray. So he's going to be assigned to DC. Brandon Silvers, everybody knows him. Obviously, Seattle fame, Seattle Dragons fame there. Memphis Express, played in the spring league with the Conquerors, which is kind of the tie-in for him because the Houston offensive coordinator is A.J. Smith, and that's where Silvers is going to be assigned. And then there is a fascinating young quarterback, Steven Montez from Colorado, the Colorado standout. He's going to be heading to Seattle. This is a very talented young kid. He spent the last 2 years in the NFL with the Detroit Lions on their practice squad with Washington, spent on and off the practice squad there. So him in Seattle with June Jones as the offensive coordinator. I can't think of very few places. It's difficult to find a better spot than that where Montez could end up. He's a type of player that could end up quickly back in the NFL. He has all the prototypical tools, size, good mobile, arm strength. He just needs playing time. So that's a good landing spot for him. You got Jalen McClendon, kind of a unique name in the bunch here. He was part of the XFL back in 2020. So it's no surprise with LA. So it's no surprise that Joey Clinkscales, who's the director of player personnel with Las Vegas, would have an interest in bringing McClendon on. Very raw prospect. He, from what I heard, he, recently participated in Hub Football and he impressed a lot of the scouts there. There are CFL teams that are interested in him as well. He's got good size, arm strength. He was with the Ravens for a little spell when he came out of school. So he's an interesting guy. A lot of these connections, coaches, AJ Smith with Brandon Silvers, Joey Clinkscales with Jalen McClendon. Of course, there's Drew Plitt, a Ball State quarterback who's a true, genuine rookie. And the word is that he'll be assigned to Arlington with Bob Stoops' staff there with Jonathan Hayes and otherwise Chuck Long as well, who's a co-offensive coordinator there. Plitt's a fascinating guy, had a very strong preseason with the Cincinnati Bengals. Didn't get a lot of playing time, but came on against the Cardinals with 6 of 6 for 76 yards and a touchdown. Played a little bit against the Giants, but he's a fascinating young talent who kind of a late bloomer in Ball State, improved every year he was there. So him and Arlington's fascinating. Then there are 2 more. Ryan Willis, another name we're familiar with in the alt league universe, TSL MVP back in 2021, playing for Hal Mummy and the linemen. He's headed towards St. Louis, which is fascinating there with former NFL quarterback Bruce Gradkowski is the offensive coordinator there with the Battlehawks. And then, of course, you got FSU Hampton quarterback DeAndre Francois. A lot of alt league guys, especially the hardcores, know who he is. Talented guy, Orlando product, Orlando native, headed towards Orlando. It's fascinating, this group. Now, it's a smart move on a lot of these young players' parts to get in on the ground floor with the XFL 3.0. To get, first off, work. You don't even need an XFL to exist to want to work with Jordan Palmer. You know, the list goes on and on who he's worked with. Josh Allen credits Jordan Palmer heavily with his turnaround. You know, he initially started out as a 50%, 58% passer in the National Football League. And he changed his mechanics through help with Jordan Palmer and biometrics. And Allen is, there are very few people that can hold a candle to him on the entire planet as far as quarterback goes right now. He's in a super elite class. We know the Joe Burrows, the Patrick Mahomes, all those guys. So if I'm a young quarterback and I'm a fringe guy who doesn't have an opportunity to play, and I'm raw and I want to improve my game, I want to work with Jordan Palmer. And the fact that he's the director of quarterback development for a professional league with the XFL, that's a nice spot for a lot of these young guys. So they got a little bit of a head start. The caveat to all this, these 8 names we're hearing, and I didn't mention the sexy one right now, Brian Scott. The caveat to this is that this is the early stages. So there's no guarantee that these names will be starters. You have to figure a couple of these guys, you have a pretty good shot at it. But especially when you come in as early as they have and start working with Palmer already. But the XFL is currently in negotiations with quarterbacks. There are a lot of free agent quarterbacks that are on the fence waiting for NFL opportunities and weighing their options of whether or not they should take a chance or take the plunge and go into the XFL. So some people might be extremely ecstatic with these names because they love a lot of these guys. They're like diamonds in the rough. Some people might be a little bit underwhelmed because they're not familiar. But I would say, there's a lot of time between now and January with the XFL having drafts, plural, and that January one's going to be fascinating right before training camp, that I would say this is not the end of it. But when the smoke clears, there's going to be 24 XFL quarterbacks, maybe a little more, but at the bare minimum, 24 XFL quarterbacks, 3 per team, 8 teams. And we're going to see some interesting names when that January period comes. Players from the USFL with expiring contracts, 12/31. And then, of course, NFL players that are on practice squads right now that don't sign futures deals. That happens in January when the NFL season ends immediately. And then there are players right now that are on the fence. The XFL has talked to players like Garrett Gilbert and Blake Bortles and players like that. And those guys are weighing. Gilbert recently worked out for NFL teams. So those players are weighing whether or not to just hang back and see if they can get another NFL spot. Some of them, it's a pride thing, like a Blake Bortles. I'm not so sure he wants to go play in the XFL. He asked for his release from the Saints a few months back because things got crowded there when they brought in Andy Dalton. So he wants to be in a situation where if he's not the starter, he's at least the legit number 2 with a chance to start. I would argue, and I'm a fan of Blake's, he's got a cult following. I would argue that the XFL is his best chance to actually get on the field and start and, and do a number, for lack of a better term, to do well and all that. And he'd be a major star. So there are a lot of guys, young guys on the fence. Cole Kelly, Akil Glass. I'm missing a few guys off the top of my head right now, but those are the types of players that definitely interest me if we're looking towards developing the next generation of quarterbacks, which is something that XFL president Russ Brandon has harped in on when the league hired Jordan Palmer.
Yeah, and obviously the Brian Scott, we'll talk about that in a second because I think that's a different scenario. I have my Bored Apes football club on it. It's cool to see, we're talking with Ray Austin on the show today, but DeAndre Francois, made name with the Glacier Boys and the Bored Apes there in Fantasy football. The thing to point out, like you said, 8 players here, plus Brian 9, but you have 8 players that we're not saying like, okay, these are assigned, they're ready to go. These are your starting quarterbacks, because I do think XFL 2020 ran into some issues with that. We're like, hey, we're going to pay Brandon Silvers all this money. And then like, maybe we should have gone with BJ Daniels or whatever. And obviously, you had like Heineke as the backup in St. Louis. Like, I think we've learned now, like, let's bring these guys in. They're still going to be on the team, but we're not saying these are your 8 starting quarterbacks.
And that's an excellent point, Reed. Anybody who followed the XFL closely 3 years ago now in 2019 is they remember the assigned quarterbacks being announced, but they also kind of forget that there were other assigned quarterbacks that joined the party late. Josh Johnson, Taylor Heineke, etc. Chase Litton. But however, there were new quarterbacks that joined later. And that's one of the primary reason that the draft was pushed from October with the last timeline in 2019 to mid-November to give more time for those fringe players to join. If Taylor Heineke, if he had joined earlier, he would have definitely been starting. So getting a jump early is a smart move for a lot of these quarterbacks. But we're definitely going to see new names because we saw them 3 years ago, and the timeline they set up November, and then with the uniqueness of the USFL situation in January, that creates an opening. So we don't know yet. These guys, they're requested by the teams, the directors of player personnel. These teams have a strong interest in them. I've heard things about we didn't see him at the QB Summit, at least not in an IG video, but I've heard things about Cole McDonald with Seattle tied into June Jones. I've heard Akil Glass in Las Vegas. Their offensive coordinator is supposed to be Dwayne Taylor. Glasses. So we'll see. A lot of guys like Glass and Kelly, they have agents that are telling them, hey, let's wait this out. Let's look at all of our options. Let's weigh them, and then we'll think about it. And I think you mentioned something there about salaries. I'm not trying to say this in any way to denigrate or belittle the quality of these quarterbacks here. But when you tend to lean more towards younger guys who are like fringe guys who don't have a lot of NFL opportunities waiting them, you have to figure that they're not going to be paid as high. The XFL in 2020 went a little overboard, some would argue, paying guys like Landry Jones and Matt McGloin close to $1 million each. So that was a lot of money for those guys. I understood why they did that. And, Stoops' connection to Landry and all that. And then McGloin got recommended by Andy Reid and the Chiefs. And those guys are NFL guys with NFL experience. And the league could actually, when you think about it, when you look at all the quarterbacks in this situation, I would prefer some variety and some established veterans. It doesn't always work out, but you'd like to have a few guys on these rosters that, whatever it be, a Ryan Finley or whomever it is, Garrett Gilbert, guys who have some level of NFL experience, because even if they don't start, which I would assume guys like Gilbert would, but even if they don't, it's great for these young quarterbacks to be in the same room with someone who's actually been in the NFL, started games, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to, and a lot of times, and I've followed these leagues my whole life, these alt leagues, a lot of times you have guys that are penciled in as the starter, and then the season starts and you go, holy cow. I remember with the Roughnecks, a lot of people thought Connor Cook was going to be the guy. And they even did Fox commercials. And then PJ Walker, we know what happened there. I remember with the original XFL, where the LA Extreme, the first overall pick in the draft was Scott Milanovic, the coach and the former CFL guy, all that. And Tommy Maddox ended up usurping him and becoming MVP, and then an NFL comeback player of the year, led the Steelers to the playoffs, all that good stuff. So even though we see some names now, there might be on the flip side, there might be some young guys that surprise us, whatever, Derek King, and end up being superstars. And there might be some, veterans that show up a little bit later to the party that appear maybe to not be the guy to take over when the season starts. Depends how they play in training camp and impress their coaches and all that. So it's fun times. It's fun thing. These are fun things to speculate and talk about.
Well, and I think I can't remember if this was when we were talking in, in one of the group chats or whatever, but players that are a part of this now, right? If we're getting ready to be signed to the XFL, there's other potential quarterbacks waiting on calls on injury, waiting on calls. They're on practice calls. Like, these are the guys that are available now that are saying, yeah, I can go to Laguna, or I think that's where it is, because Brandon Silvers, I think it was AJ's girlfriend or whatever tweeted out the photo with Silvers, and we're like, okay, well, he's obviously there. Like, these are guys, not that you don't have anything going on right now, but these are the guys who are saying, like, hey, like, we're choosing this. This is my next best option, where some of these other players might still be holding that, like, hey, I could get a call here if someone goes down, or we need to get elevated up or whatever, right?
It's a smart play. Exactly. It's a smart play by a lot of these young quarterbacks, like get in on the ground floor, get a jump start. And, you're not in pro football, you're not guaranteed a starting spot. We'll see how many of these guys actually end up starting by the time February rolls around. But I would want to, if I was a young quarterback out there, I'm a Jalen McClendon, any of these guys, I want to go work with Jordan Palmer and get in on it. So, and then, some of these guys have connections to the coaching staffs. It helps a guy like Brandon. I know it's not the sexiest to some of I was a Brandon Silvers guy in the AAF and was happy when the XFL got him in 2020. And it just didn't work out. Mike Riley, the offensive coordinator, left before the season to deal with family issues. Things got kind of jumbled there with Zorn. Didn't work out. Daniels fit better. So who knows? And Silvers played well in TSL with AJ Smith, which is why he's there. So you want to, I don't know. Do I think Silvers is going to start day one? I have my doubts, but it doesn't hurt that he already knows the offensive system, has worked with AJ Smith before. And so that helps. And he's working with Jordan Palmer. You never know. Jordan Palmer could tweak his throwing motion. And that could be something that would, it happened with Josh Allen. Josh Allen, I put videos in my articles about Josh Allen saying I changed my entire throwing motion because of Jordan Palmer. And now look at him. I mean, like I said before, there's very few players on the entire planet as good as he is. So anyway, but that's where we are. So yeah, these young guys, they're coming in and they're getting an opportunity. And the existence of leagues like this is so great for these guys because they have nowhere else to play American pro football where they can actually get an opportunity to get snaps and reps. You know, if you're a guy who's on a fringe or a practice squad guy, you almost never. Kurt Bankert was going to be. He's a guy who's a young veteran who's, you know, his snaps in the NFL, very good college player. Snaps in the NFL is kneel downs. That's it. He doesn't have any passes. So, and now he signed with the Niners. They have injuries there with Trey Lance and everything else. And I know that he was one of the quarterbacks, and obviously he publicized it, that he was talking to the XFL. So Bankert would have been one of these guys, and maybe still could be. Who knows what happens if the Niners let him go and all that kind of stuff, what happens by the time January rolls around. But there's a lot of quarterbacks like Kurt Bankert who are talented, were very good in college, but, you know, unless heaven and earth are moved and everybody gets hurt, they're not going to get an opportunity to play.
So obviously, and then we'll get to Brian Scott here. The immediate question is, okay, compare this to the USFL, right? What do we think of the talent quality? And like we said, this is just the first list of many. These guys could never step foot on the field, right? You just have Brandon Silvers in there. Maybe it's a favor. Maybe AJ is like, hey, let's bring him in. He can kind of help lead the locker room, right? A little, the locker room here while we're kind of going through all this stuff. It's good to have some older, like what Silver's doing right now, right?
Right.
And not in I podcast about the XFL, so it's fine. But in terms of the quality of these 8 plus Scott, versus the USFL now, like what do you make of it?
I liked some of the USFL quarterbacks out there. And so we saw like Luis Perez, a veteran, played well. Unfortunately, he ended up with the Rams. Unfortunately, he was cut fairly quickly there. And then, you got the Kyle Sloters and all those guys. And they had Clayton Thorsons and all that. Unfortunately, none of the USFL quarterbacks are currently on NFL rosters. So I don't know if that tells you something there. Maybe Case Cookus could have had an opportunity if he didn't get injured in the championship game there. So there's quite a few of the, right now it's so early, it's such an early sample. I think what the XFL is going towards, which is kind of fascinating, and I think it was tipped off when they hired Jordan Palmer, it doesn't appear to me that they're looking for veteran name guys or guys have been around 5-6 years, that kind of thing, that have kind of like their NFL window is closed, which a lot of the players, I don't want to be disrespectful at all because I like a lot of the USFL players, and Neil Stratton made this point, which is a pretty strong one. A lot of the players that played in the NFL, in the USFL had the NFL window closed on them completely. And a lot of times that happens in these leagues. A lot of the guys who end up in these leagues, they've had that door shut on them for a couple seasons, 2-3 years. And then they go, okay, I'll do this. I'm not going back to the NFL. Let me just give this a shot. And that's what happens with a lot of these players. And I think the XFL is looking for young players that still, Steven Montez has all the physical tools to be back on an NFL roster. So he has the size, he has the speed, he has all that. He just needs playing time and development. And working with Jordan Palmer and June Jones eventually, that's going to help him. Hopefully gets playing time and reps. So I think the XFL is taking a different strategy here. That's not to say they won't add a Garrett Gilbert or maybe a Blake Bortles or a Brett Hundley or a Deshaun Kaiser or any of those guys, some young veterans who have NFL experience. But I think the XFL is going more towards the next generation of quarterbacks, the guys who can still have an upside to be fixtures in the NFL and to be fixtures in the pro football landscape, to be stars for 10 years and beyond. So we'll see if that strategy pays off. I would argue that you need a little bit more balance, and that if you're starting 8 rookie quarterbacks, essentially, you're running the risk of having a lot of players struggle because rookie quarterbacks struggle. So we'll see. You'd like to have a few veterans, but it's fascinating. Until we see the full list of XFL guys, we can't really weigh it. All these leagues, since I've been following them, and it's like this in the NFL too. There's a few elite guys. There's bottom end guys that kind of suck. And then there's like middle of the run. And we see that in the CFL 9-team league. There's like a few super elite guys, a couple of OKs, and a couple of struggling guys on the bottom end. And I saw that in XFL 2020. I saw that in the AAF. I saw that in the USFL. And so, and it's common even in the NFL. So where there's like the super elite, and then the bottom end, there's a lot of young guys, the Justin Fields, the Zach Wilsons, these guys struggling to try to find their way. So we'll see what the picture looks like when we get to January, when the smoke clears. That's why I'm hesitant to just jump and judge their quarterbacks, because there's honestly right now, because I wrote an article about the 20 potential XFL quarterbacks. I know they've all been in discussions and negotiations with the league. That's why I wrote the article. And so I know there's a lot of guys right now on the fence. And so I'd love to see like if we're going next generation, I would love to see Carson Strong, Akil Glass, Cole Kelly, a big 6'7" quarterback there. So there's a lot of like young talent that's not going to get a chance to play in the NFL that I would love to see get an opportunity in the XFL to develop. So that's the exciting part. You know, like if the XFL tomorrow announced that Mike Glennon was one of the quarterbacks, he has NFL experience. He started. He would bring some veteran leadership to the room. I'm sure he's a good guy, but there's nothing sexy about Mike Glennon whatsoever. It's a little bit more sexy Derek King. He's 5'9", he's short, everything like that, but he's like such a playmaker, fast. He could be really fun in that DC offense. That's more exciting, the upside of what he can become, than Mike Glennon. We kind of know who he is. He'd probably be a serviceable guy, but there's no fun in that.
It's interesting when you're talking about the quarterbacks, and this relates to all the different players for both of these leagues. Our mutual friend Emery Hunt, when he was on a couple weeks ago, talking about like, not entirely, but how both of these leagues, USFL and XFL, should really be targeting different people. Like you said, and with the time of year they're playing, USFL, it's guys that, like you said, their window's closed. They are not worried about hopping into a camp here come June, July. I mean, you get a Cavante Turpin that works out. XFL, where they're playing February, you get these guys right off, and then they get back in the next year. Same with the quarterback. Someone takes off. Come April, you get signed, go back in the next year. I think, like you said, both these leagues should be setting their identity slightly different, right? Obviously, we're trying to get the best talent, but there are, I think, players better suited for either of these leagues.
And I agree. And I like the idea of thinking outside the box, because when a lot of times there are guys, the Kyler Murray types, he's an anomaly, right? But I don't know if he's 5'8", 5'7", standing on a phone book. I don't know if people use phone books anymore, but there are players like that get ignored. And I know this sounds crazy. I've been following the NFL my whole life. I write about the New York Jets, all that stuff. But the NFL misses on players. There are players that I know a lot of people are like, wow, there's no doubt the National Football League is the best of the best, cream of the crop. The best top 1% of football players end up in that league. No doubt about it. But the NFL misses on players because they overlook guys because of what schools they came from, their size, their speed, their weight, all that. And the XFL, the USFL, they need to think outside the box. Now, we listened to Rod Woodson on the Pat McAfee show, and they talked about what type of quarterbacks these leagues should have. And the group there was talking about mobile quarterbacks, and you need a mobile quarterback. And yeah, you can lean in that direction with a lot of these guys, King, Francois, all these guys who have that kind of exciting mobility, and that you can mold into great passers and all that. So they have to think outside the box. You have to. The NFL misses too when it comes to quarterbacks. They overrate guys, overhype guys, and overlook guys, and you see that happen all the time. So it's the XFL's job to find those players, and the USFL's job to find those players that have been overlooked, that haven't gotten a fair opportunity, and to give them a chance to overlook the fact that a quarterback's 5'8" or 5'7" or whatever the case may be there, and just give them a shot to play. King's not in the NFL right now because people don't want to play extremely short guy at quarterback who's maybe a little bit inconsistent as a passer, and they don't have time to refine his mechanics. XFL kind of does, so they can do that. So you hit the areas where the NFL's missing. That's how I would put it. I know that all the coaches are out there talking about developing players for the NFL. I think it's finding NFL quality players that aren't in the NFL, and that's how you present a great professional football league.
Circling back now, Brian Scott, a longtime friend of the show, fan favorite, everyone loves him, and This was interesting because, I had corresponded with Brian and, it said, hey, might have some options here. We don't know. I think that's fair to at least, he's sitting on Jordan Palmer's couch and you're like, I thought that would be a really interesting play, right? Kind of the first shot across the bow, here's someone that performed really well in the USFL and then got injured. And I know Case Cookus did really well. I think Brian Scott is probably a better quarterback than Case Cookus, right? I mean, I think we can say it that way, even though Case, made it to the championship game. But seeing Brian on the couch, kind of knowing his contract status, right, in terms of being one of the first year USFL, what did you make of it with seeing Brian Scott there and knowing that he's in the mix?
I thought it was bold, brazen. It's kind of like it fits Brian Scott's personality and the way he plays on the field. For people who haven't seen him play, he's got a lot of swagger. Reminds me a lot of like Brett Favre and those types of quarterbacks, gunslinger types, extremely confident. And I think it's a smart play on his part. He messaged me a few minutes ago I won't get into what he said to me, but he messaged me a few minutes ago here. It's hard not to like him. It's hard not to root for him. And I think my opinion on it is that, if he wink, wink signs with the XFL, I would assume that he's definitely a candidate to start on one of these teams and he might have his choice. I think he's the kind of guy like maybe a lot of the mainstream doesn't know who he is. But he just needs a full-on opportunity. It's unfortunate what happened to USFL getting hurt, but I think he's got a lot of talent, a lot of moxie. I know people out there like from Pro Football Focus and Ian Hartitz, who was a guest on your show. He was impressed. He had never seen Brian Scott before, and he was impressed with him. He was like one of the guys he was touting, and then unfortunately got hurt. He was just, when you watch him play, it's hard not to like his game. So and him being a part of this, it's a smart play on Brian's part. Because Brian has the tools, a little cup of coffee, working out for the Colts and trying to make those NFL rosters and all that. Brian has the talent where, like, there's upside still with him. He's not an old guy at all, but there's a chance if you work with a Jordan Palmer, and then if you are a superstar in the XFL and you shine on ABC and ESPN, there's a chance he will, because right now the window is not open for him to go in the NFL. It is what it is, but it could be. So I would, it's a great play on his part, regardless of what his contractual situation is currently. So, I mean, that's a little bit, there's not a lot I can get into in terms of all that, but I think we kind of know the story. I've written about the 1231 thing and all that. So it's just fascinating to see a current USFL player working out with the XFL's director of quarterback development.
Yeah. And I've had, I'm sure, 1/80th of the number of people that have talked to you, players and stuff. But, I have a couple guys ask me like, what do you think? Got the XFL call in, you got the, what do you think? And I'm like, we know what the USFL is. I know what this is. I know what season 2 is going to be. They do 2 hubs, whatever. Like, I know what this is going to be like. Same like you're saying with these guys, and we're bringing in the NFL retreads, or do you want to take the upside? Like, and this isn't even being the XFL homework. I would take the upside of whatever the hell this XFL thing is going to be right now. I know that they seem to be spending an exorbitant amount of money, but I would try, if they're calling, I would try that, I understand, and, burn the hands, there's sort of 2 in the bush and that whole situation. But like, I'm saying, if you have someone calling, I would at least give it a shot, because God knows, what you're going back to otherwise. And I do think like, let's say Brian's here at whatever, and then let's say they do, hey, Brian, doesn't work out. You don't think USFL is going to be like, hey, okay, welcome back? Like, I mean, they're not. So
in a heartbeat, yeah.
So I think that I would gamble. A bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and it's great that these players have these options. Usually, I guess I could usually I give you and you give me peeks behind the curtain in private. And then but you mentioned something there that sparked something with me. On Monday, you and I were on the phone talking when the Jordan Palmer thing broke. And then as soon as I got off the phone with you, I was on the phone with an agent who represents a few different players in the USFL, and was actually going over XFL specifics with me and whether or not their players should choose the USFL. And you got to sit there when these options you have to consider. One of this agent's players signed on with the USFL in the last few days. And what you have to weigh is opportunity. So if you're a kicker or a punter, right now you're looking at the XFL specialist showcase, and you're looking at the coaching staffs, and you're wondering, these guys are probably going to sign NFL cuts. Am I even going to have a chance? But if the Maulers have an opening at kicker or punter, and that it's right there for you, go grab it now. So you have to weigh it, in terms of like what works best for you. You have to study rosters, see what connections you have to coaching staff. So, but it's great that these players have these choices. I know a lot of prominent USFL players that are waiting until the new year, until the clock strikes 12 midnight for their, and never, that are just already, we saw 10 USFL assistants join the XFL, from the Gamblers, from the Stallions, all that. It's fair to speculate that players that they coach in the USFL are just ready to scratch the itch and rejoin their coach in the other league, whether that be Dishman with the General, who was with the Generals, who's now with Las Vegas, and otherwise. So these players have options. These coaches have options. It's a good thing. How long this lasts, we'll see. But for the time being, we got 2 viable pro football leagues in the spring.
I want to get to team names and all that here real quick before we transition. Can we put to bed, we haven't had you on since we had the, like you said, the 10 USFL coordinators, all that stuff, go over there. And everything I see online is, the XFL, they just paid them so much money. They're just buying all this talent up, right? Can we put to bed that most of these coaches probably moved for lateral moves, lesser moves? Like, it wasn't like the XFL was like, well, how much do we need to pay to get Dishman? Or can we put to bed that theory before we move on?
Yeah, the XFL wasn't breaking the bank for these assistants. I'm not saying that they're not getting a little bit more money than they did in the USFL, the Chris Dishmans, Jonathan Himballs, all these guys. But the reason why the assistants made the lateral moves that you mentioned, Tim Lewis, otherwise, the reason why they did it is because they prefer the XFL. They prefer the setup. Tim Lewis wants to go back and work with Jay Hayes. And so, and they're working together in Arlington there. They prefer the league setup. They prefer the organization of it, the timeline, all that. They chose the XFL because they think it's a better opportunity and they believe that it's going to be a better league. So we'll see how that goes. We saw Larry Fedora, who left the USFL after the season. It was quite interesting. When the USFL season ended, he made the comment that, hey, we're going into a bunch of hubs and it's going to be great next year. We're going to be like a real football league with home games and road games, and it's going to be great. A couple of months pass and he says, I'm out. I'm going to deal with family stuff. I want to be closer to family. That's cool. Respect that all the way. But then about 5 seconds after he says that, he says, well, maybe if they, go to their local markets, I'll come back. So wait a minute. Did you leave because of an emergency, or did you leave because, the setup's not for you? That tells you if that coach was leaving as a head coach because he, and he's saying that if they change the setup, I'll come back. That tells you that he left because of the setup, right? So there's a lot of these coaches that, guys from the Stallions on a good staff with Holtz, an excellent team, obviously won the championship. They jumped ship to the XFL. A lot of these coaches, the Chris Dishmans of the world, want to work with Rod Woodson and Darren Perry, and be on that staff and have those connections there. And they worked in the XFL back at 20. So they have connections back there, personnel guys and otherwise. So a lot of the assistants and the players in the USFL, wanted to be part of the XFL, was hoping that it would return before 2022 and 2023. So ended up going to the USFL for the time being and just waited out until the XFL comes back in business. So none of these guys are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to jump ship so they could coach running backs in the other league. Just not happening.
All right. So we done a half-hour team, or quarterbacks, all that, and then we're gonna split. We're gonna do half hour on this because we got Commissioner Ray Austin gonna be stopping by. Leaked logo, or not logo, leaked team names came out via the website and newsroom, and then Hub and Board and everyone, this whole thing. And I yelled at Stefan online, and now it looks like I'm going to have to eat crow, and that's fine. I mean, I came home a little intoxicated from a One Republic concert, and I'm like, wait, what is happening here? Like, sometimes I just look at, I'm sure you do, like, what is going on? Like the Sea Dragons, all that. We discussed it all last week, but obviously XFL teams all returning, except for the Seattle Sea Dragons. And then we have the Vipers going to Vegas. We have this all in theory, the Guardians going to Orlando, and then the Brahmas in San Antonio. What was your instant reaction to kind of seeing all the team names leaked?
I got hit from every different direction. Everybody messaging me saying, "Oh my God, the website showed a bunch of names." I'm like, "Oh boy, what was it?" And then you see Sea Dragons and all this stuff. So, I know, like, some people can tout it as breaking a story, but like, you got to give credit to the guys like the Maxes, the Jake Henrys. These guys, I don't know if these leagues understand. These guys spent day and night doing research and trying to find, in some cases, guys are trying to crack codes on websites. They're going to all these different websites and YouTube channels and trademark sites and all this globally to try to find information and try to find hidden videos and all this. So that's what happened here. It's not a breaking story by a news service that talked to sources or even like fun speculation. It's fans that noticed, because once Rod Woodson said, next week, we're going to get the names. Our name's the coolest, all that. As that was like a call out to the Jake Henrys of the world and all these guys. Okay, start searching. And so they check the trademark sites, check the website. And that's what happened here. Check the website. All of a sudden, look at this XFL shop. It's got the names. So yeah, a lot of hysteria came after that. And I expect hysteria either way when the names are revealed, because it's so subjective. And then with names and uniforms and all that. So I'm not surprised, because as I've reported for months, 5 of the names are returning. The 5 cities are returning, with the exception of Dallas is now Arlington and Seattle's now the Sea Dragons. To me, depending on what kind of logo you use for Sea Dragons, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I wouldn't have added it. I don't think it's necessary to call them the Sea Dragons, but maybe the logo will change my mind. It'll be really cool looking. I don't know. But people are still going to shorten it and call them the Dragons, just like people shorten the Seahawks to call them the Hawks. So it's like, so it's not, it's not a deal breaker for me whatsoever. The fascinating part is the 3 new cities. That's where the argument begins, I think. Because we would have went crazy if the Battlehawks didn't come back, if the Defenders and all these cool brands didn't come back. So it comes down to, and ad nauseum people have discussed Las Vegas Vipers, and bringing back 2 of the brands can be questioned. And the lone brand, that's a brand new one, is something that is obviously something Dwayne Johnson wants. The question is whether the public wants that.
I will give Max credit to the day. It's the San Antonio Dwayne Johnsons. That is the team. I just, with the websites, with the shop, the logo before, like, I honestly can't believe like we're still doing this. Like, we don't have a backup server. What this tells me is, like, you don't, I guess I just don't get it. Like, I was thinking about this the other night, Mike Simon. I'm like, here we have Danny Garcia, Dwayne Johnson. We are premiering Black Adam, part of this DC universe. Comic book fans, biggest hardcore fan base in the world. Like, we die hard. Like, we're searching all this stuff. Okay, who's going to make what's the extra scene? This is that, but with a football. And like the fact that they don't get that people are going to be like checking the website, and now we're hiring a website director the day after the shop is taken down. With I'm like, do you not? And I get it, and I get that this is a job to some people, and they're like, I don't really care, but like, I constantly feel like in covering this new version of the XFL, that like I'm the loser that cares too much, right? And a lot of our fans are the losers that care too much, and I don't like that. Like, I want you, I would wish they would just embrace that more. Of like, we are like the diehard. We're gonna get the casuals. We're gonna get the Rock Instagram. But like, let's facilitate the hardcore people that have kept this going. And we've talked offline. A lot of the interactions the last couple weeks have not felt like that. That like we are truly embracing these people that are like carrying this, brand with us.
I'm with you, Reed, and I totally get people's like anger, frustration, impatience, all that. It's all valid, and it seems like with the XFL, they haven't presented the product yet, so we can't judge it until they do so. But it feels like the last 2 years since they've owned the league, there's been a lot of stops, starts, restarts, and a few mishaps in between. Not earth-shattering or deal-breaking, but we saw with the XFL logo that, kind of like accidentally showed up on YouTube. Rod Woodson, whether or not he, like in football terms, had a false start here, and kind of like jump the gun or not, you have to still run the next play, no matter what the down and distance is. So I feel like, it's kind of fascinating that Rod Woodson went on Rich Eisen and Pat McAfee, two extremely popular shows. And the league did not piggyback it. They didn't retweet it. They didn't share it on social media. They didn't say, yep, that's right, Rod, next week, next Wednesday. No tease, no buildup, none of that. And you have to question, and it makes you wonder whether or not, their plans were like sped up a little bit. And then you have to question the presentation and the rollout, how they're doing that, how they're handling it. And then it goes without saying that the names and the colors and the logos and uniforms are all going to have divisive opinions. There are going to be some people who love this stuff, some people that don't. Some people think this is a PG show, so I'm not going to curse, but some people think they effed up. So they screwed up. So, so that's coming, but it's how you do it. It's how you roll it out. And I got to say, the big problem with the XFL and even the USFL is they're trying to live up to the league that we saw in 2020. And so I'm not saying that it wasn't without issues, the XFL in 2020, but the way they presented their league, rolled things out, the social media, all that, they did a tremendous job. And there's some people within the league right now that were a part of XFL in 2020, but right now it's not feeling that way. That they have now, maybe that can change, that perception can change, but these mishaps, website mishaps, and, coaches coming out and saying memes are coming next week, and then kind of like not taking the right steps. If you were planning on doing it Wednesday, which some of my sources have told me that, some have said they weren't planning. So there's a lot of mixed messaging because there's a lot of coaches and people work within the league that don't know what upper management is doing, which is because that's usually how it happens. But if you were planning this past Wednesday to be the day that names are released, then waiting till the day before, after a guy just went on a national show, you could easily say, retweet Rod Woodson, say, next week in 7 days time, you will see the team names, the colors, logos maybe, and then there we are. But waiting a day before, and even if that was the strategy, I have to question it. There are people out there that thought maybe because live events were scheduled, only like 3 or 4, that they're going to introduce 4 names this week and then 4 names next week, that kind of thing. We'll see. Maybe the Hurricanes, a good thing. Maybe they'll present it in a better way, roll it out in a better way. They're going to be judged by their actions. And, and they're going to be held to a high standard because of the league that last came. They don't like that. The office doesn't like hearing that, but I'm sorry. And then the USFL office doesn't like hearing that too, because of the way the XFL in 2020 engaged with their fan base and through social media and through all that stuff. And then, so they were critiqued on their lack of doing those things. So that's kind of like where we stand. So there's a lot of frustration. Look, I expect the team names to be, it's how you do it. Everyone expects these teams to have names. Everyone expects these players to have uniforms. They're not going to be naked in February. They're not going to play on the field naked. And we all know there's going to be a TV schedule and team schedules, and Las Vegas is going to play somewhere. They're still talking to Allegiant. Hopefully that gets finalized. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully they don't play in Arlington, which I'm not hearing that's the case. But you had Kevin Seifert on a few months back, and he talked about how difficult it is to line up venue deals. Well, here we are. That's the last one of the bunch they need to check off. So anyhow, but I get the frustration. It's valid, and all these things are coming. It's not the fact that they're not coming. It's the fact on how we're arriving at the destination. In life, and not just in football and sports, in this analogy, the journey is just as fun, sometimes even more fun than the destination. So if they were teasing these things, playing them up nicely, I think back to 2019 when the XFL released parts of each logo and told you next week we're going to reveal the logos. People were sitting there looking at a little square, figuring out if it's a spider or tarantula or what kind of a creature is this. So, I mean, it was maybe a little silly, but still fun. That's the fun part about it, is like the speculation, the journey and all that. So hopefully when these things come, and let's be honest, Reed, when they do reveal these names and stuff and the colors and all that, others are going to be critical. So some people are going to like them. Some people are not. Some people are going to say, why'd you do that to the Defender's Shield? Some people are going to say, why didn't you keep the sword in the wings with the Battlehawks? Why did you put this in there? So there's going to be plenty of that, but that's commonplace. But there are a lot of people that care about this league. And surprisingly enough, 2 years later. And so it's the league has to reward their loyal followers and make it fun, not aggravating. Make it fun. I mean, I would almost excuse them if they released the names on purpose by accident, wink, wink, on the website, and they had a couple of fake names to throw people off just to get people talking. But I get the sense, based on previous evidence, that's not what they did here. So it is what it is. Here we are.
Yeah, it's like you said, none of this feels fun, like at all. Like it feels like we're cloak and dagger this whole time. We're making this Hollywood movie. We're this fan-friendly league. We don't want to be, and it's just hard. Like, and I understand the hurricane and all that. When I got my message that said, "Hey, I'm hearing this is going to be delayed," I thought, and totally justifiable. I understand we don't want to have events while people in Florida are suffering. Totally understand, but I'm just like, this is just like another one of these things, right? It's just another, and like you said, I understand that. Okay, we don't like being judged by the XFL 2020. Like, then start the Rock Football League, or start something like you are buying in and inheriting and feel like this is good enough will to purchase this league and bring this stuff along. Like you said, when they had this Seattle event that was supposed to be, I was talking to Van. Van was one of, obviously had season tickets in all the different markets. And I said, "Hey Van, like, did you get an email? Like, is there a Seattle event coming?" And he's like, "Yeah, like, didn't you get your, not even media, just like, did you get your season ticket holder email?" And I'm like, "No." And like, that is a problem. Like, we had 6 tickets in the front row of the 50-yard line at CenturyLink Field. How were none of us got, like, none of my 6 friends that we were all season ticket holders? This just seems weird to me that, like, we're doing these events, but then, like, they're secretive and we're sending out the invites. We don't want people to know. And then they get shared, and then we're mad because people are like, none of it feels fun. And I just don't understand, like, why. I never get why this has to be so difficult.
Yeah. And it's this, I'll get in trouble for this one. And it's not the first time I've been yelled at or had arguments with people within the league. There's some level of leadership. There are, like, certain divisions have to be policed. I understand they're still hiring people and they're still working on that, but you can't have mishaps. Like, the website's not the first time. It happened with the logo and the YouTube and all that, and video being released. So a lot of these mistakes they're worse than actually making people wait for the names to be released, is to, like, do it this way. We're finding out about quarterbacks and team names by mistake, but kind of like not intentional or great planning or a brilliant rollout strategy. I wouldn't classify any of this as that. So by accident, we know the quarterbacks. I mean, I've known a few of them and couldn't say anything for a while. And I wrote about them a month ago. I put their names in an article about what quarterbacks the league was targeting and going to sign and looking towards having. But still, nevertheless, so they're going to be held up against, and they have a lot of people from the XFL in 2020. They're going to be held against a different standard. If this was just a brand, even if they had changed the name to the Rock Football League, which you're almost doing that by having one of the teams called the Brahmas. Might as well have a Boston Black Adams and a few others while you're at it. But and don't get me wrong. Look, I'll say this: the Brahma Bull was a cool tattoo on the Rock. Was a cool nickname. It's actually, through Under Armour, Project Rock, all that stuff. Those are pretty badass looking shirts and athletic gear and hoodies. So the logo is pretty dope. Yeah, exactly. The logo's dope. I'm not saying it's not, and maybe it'll grow on me. Maybe the uniforms will be so badass that we're like, what the hell? We're the Brahmas. It just feels a little weird to name them after one of your team owners, but it is what it is. It's his league, right? He can do that if he wants, I suppose. But yeah, a lot of these missteps are not great. Strangely enough, I have faith in this, that they're going to present a very cool league, but faith is one thing, but you also have to see these things in play. So until, it's like judging anything in sports, they have to produce the players, they have to produce good football, they have to produce. So go time is kind of here, but not really. I mean, because they're still kind of planting seeds behind the scenes before they actually go full force. When they release the team names, you would figure that you'd have your social media teams all set and ready to go. XFL Guardians, XFL Defenders. they'd have videos from the coaches talking about the team name and the colors and what it represents and this, that, and the other. We can't wait to show you the uniforms. They're coming soon. We can't wait to draft the players, all this. So they need to start ramping that up. You know, if they're going to reveal team names and logos, colors, they need to do that. And they need to start making steps. I understand it's hard to get attention during the NFL season, but that's what happens when you have a league that's coming out in February and you have drafts during the fall and all that. It's part of the trade-off. And I understand the strategy behind doing it in the middle of the week. And you have partnerships with ESPN. So maybe The Rock and Danny plan on doing stuff with ESPN during the middle of the week. And I think there's some people felt that way about Hurricane Ian, why things were canceled this past week, because maybe Danny Garcia was planning on doing some traveling and doing all that. But anyway, it is what it is. But they're going to need to produce. They're going to be held to a higher standard. I know people who are outside who don't follow the twice failed league kind of scoff at that, but they don't understand how good of a league the XFL was, how well it was run. And the quality of their play, because they have almost 20 players still in the NFL 3 seasons later. So there goes that argument. And then how they connected with their fan base. It's how you connect. So it's how you engage. It's so transparency has been a little bit of an issue, even amongst players and agents who reach out to someone like me, who's a writer, and trying to figure out how they can get into the XFL, what the salaries are and all that. That shouldn't happen. I'm just a guy, right? I shouldn't be sitting here like talking to agents for 2 hours about what training camp salaries are. So the transparency and all that is like a little bit of a weakness with this league. And they're going to need to do a better job of rolling things out the way things were set up last week, in my opinion, with just a few live events and maybe a day before you're going to tease it. That's not how I'd want to release any team brand or team or identities. That's not how I would do it. You know, and I'm not $7. I'm nowhere near, but I'll tell you, that's the thing. Rock comes from the Vince McMahon school. You have something, you promote, I can't curse here. You promote the hell out of it. And so you promote it to the point where you annoy people. So I think there's certain things they need to do a better job of, and that maybe these leagues are sensitive, don't like the scrutiny, but hey, I can only judge you by your actions. So thus far, action and some of the inaction, a lot of stops and starts with this new ownership group. Look at the CFL business. So there are people out there that are passionate about this and that are upset. That's good that people care, because that people care, but you don't want to get to the point where people stop caring. And it's up to them how they roll this out, how they properly do this, how they get their organization together. Maybe in a few months from now, we'll look back at this and laugh. And in the moment, maybe a lot of people were overreacting, maybe, but they can rectify a lot of this stuff by producing action wise.
Well, and I haven't thought, but and even with the events, like, okay, we're scheduling them. We don't have a location. We're changing the times. I know we got into it in our private messaging. I think having a fan event at 11 a.m. on a weekday, I understand coaches and everyone, we have schedules, and maybe someone like that is insanity to me. They're like, well, it's 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. Like, come on out. It's like, I work from home and I can't even, I talk with Max a lot, we're our friend, and, we live in all this, right? I'm on this every day, and this is, what we do. And like, I understand that we are like the minority of whatever, and they get casual fans, and we don't care. And these nerds are digging into, like, we don't even care. And, Max has told me, well, they know that they have us no matter what, right? Because like when the draft comes, we're all in it. And I said, yeah, they're going to have the hardcore fans in spite of everything that they are doing. Not because, in spite of what they are doing, that we are carried along. I don't feel like any, I think the town hall brought a lot of goodwill, but I don't think a lot of actions over the last 2 years have been encouraging. If you are someone that was like, I already have my money spent on this, and I want to see, how this is going to pan out.
The live events were an awkward thing too, because what if the league didn't announce their team names this week? There would have been a lot of disappointing people who like either took off from work or decided, hey, let me head on over there during my lunch break or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden it's just nothing wrong with meeting coaches and personnel and meeting other fans. That's awesome. But I think because of the Rod Woodson thing, and then the league not piggybacking it, everybody expected, oh, wait a minute, here are the Defenders uniforms or whatever. And then there's a chance maybe they didn't get all that. So some missteps. No doubt about it. It's like just the way I get it. Anytime you schedule there's a lot of different factors involved. Anytime you schedule weekday events during the day, during the middle of the day, whatever the case may be, it's tough on the people who need to show up. You're not guaranteed to get people who have to work and do things. And then it's tough on the people who have to show up and represent the league, whatever it be personnel, whether it be, director, player personnel or coaches, whatever. So lining that all up, it's not an easy thing, scheduling, travel, back and forth, all that. So, the way that it was set up, to me, the live events didn't seem like they were going to be, I hate to put it this way, anything special. So, but because of the Rod Woodson reveal, a lot of people assumed these maybe could be like grand announcement events, activation events, I've heard. So, and then to have them at only 3 locations, if you're announcing your 8 team names, that seems a little bit, like that's not, so I get the criticism. I totally do. I think some people have agendas who are criticizing the league and that are just looking for anything to pick on. That's why they only get like 1 or 2 likes on social media because they're saying nonsense. Meanwhile, 2 years ago, they were sleeping in defenders' blankets and pillows. So there's that. But little shot fired there. But I think the criticism by the people who do care and want to see this succeed, always valid. I can't use the customer's always right analogy, but they're almost always right. So you have to listen to your fan base and you have to understand, like the people that have been patient and loyal, been waiting, you just do right by them. So, people are going to be upset when the names are revealed. I'm a New York Guardians guy. I don't think you should be taking that brand out of New York. I don't think it makes sense. I loved it in New York. I love the colors. I love the goth theme. I love the Guardians of Gotham, all that stuff. I thought it was cool. That was a nice, like a dark, cool, gritty theme. And to move it over to Orlando, which is like, I would say besides Hurricane Ian and all that, is the opposite of that. So anyhow, but there's certain things that I'm upset about as a fan, but that's a personal thing. The names and the colors, at the end of the day, hopefully the uniforms are cool and everything. It's not going to be a backbreaker to me, but I think how you treat your fans, how you engage with them, how you make them anticipate and how you make them excited about your league and your product is important. That's something that the XFL in 2020 succeeded with. That's something that this new group, I know they talked about content creation centers and connecting fans with players and all that. Proof's going to be in the pudding when they eventually lay everything out. It feels like right now they're not 100% full go yet. And it's been like that for a while now. And people are anxiously waiting for them to turn it on, press go, turn the keys ignition, start moving forward. And then, because once they do, it's going to be nonstop because there's so much news coming our way. Got no choice but to draft players, announce the TV schedule, the TV announcers, lay out their rules, all this stuff. So uniforms, everything else. So play the games. So there's going to be a lot coming our way. But, this little period in between hasn't been perfect.
I tried to share audio there, and I ended up sharing the screen. Hopefully I didn't divulge any confidential information. I have one voicemail specifically for you, and then we got to get out of here because I have Ray Austin. I think I have this shared correctly. This is a voicemail from Jenna. Remember, you can always leave voicemails, and you got 2 minutes to hit this mic, and then we'll get out of here.
Hey, it's Jen. Quick thoughts on the XFL Guardians. I'm curious if they're going to maybe ditch the gargoyle logo and maybe go with something along the lines of Space Force Guardians. I only think about that because they're going to be in Florida. That's where the Kennedy Space Station is. And then the green color. Is the logo uniform going to have military ties? So just curious what the Markcast thought about that. Okay, bye.
I also know, I think Mark had like Guardians of the Galaxy. Are we doing that? I mean, thoughts on that, and then we got to get out of here.
I think that's an excellent question by Jenna. I have seen that suggested on social media, both what you just mentioned with Mark Perry and both fans mentioning people talking about aquatic kind of thing with Aquaman and all that. I think they have to. Because you can't go with that. Like I was mentioning a few minutes ago, you can't go with that dark, gritty theme in Orlando. You need to change it up. If you just copying and pasting the New York Guardian thing and just shipping it over to Orlando, it's a bad move. You have to kind of create your own little mark there, even if you're using the same name, and which that might create problems, by the way, with the Fugazi MLB team in Cleveland there, the fake Guardians. So we might see something happen there. Hopefully not. But anyhow, I love using the term fugazi. But anyhow, Jenna, I love the question. I think it's a very good point. I think the league has to do that. They have to put it needs to fit more the theme of Orlando, Sunshine State, all that. And if there is, in fact, green involved, then it would lends itself more to a different type of Guardian than the one that the XFL New York Guardian, which is a team, by the way, that Danny Garcia had interest in purchasing. Danny has the chairwoman has ties to the Florida area. So maybe shouldn't be shocked that The Rock's getting his own team with the Brahmas and Danny's getting her own team with the Guardians. But I do think they need to tweak. Janet Duke's a big factor in the current XFL. She was obviously a big factor with the New York Guardians. I do think I would have personally gone with a totally different brand. I personally would have done that. You can make it work. So I'll wait and see how they present it. But to me, they're always going to be there's a fake Guardians in the Major League Baseball right now. And the Orlando Guardians to me are going to be the fake Guardians. So I'll accept it. I love Terrell Buckley. Love that market. Awesome. But it seems like there's going to be a couple of teams I'm probably rooting against when I'm not supposed to say that as a media member, but there's going to be a lot of players that I like on these teams. It's going to take a while to get used to some of this stuff. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, they have to change the theme. They can't run with the same dark, gritty theme that was attached to New York. That, in my opinion, was perfect.
Well, Mike, we'll have to get you on again. We'll see here. Try to time it with the announcements. We're doing the best. I thought this was a good therapy session today. Really appreciate your time and all the work you're doing. I know everyone really appreciates it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Reed. Same to you. You do such a tremendous job for this community, keeping everybody abreast of things. And I know this has become a daily, minute-by-minute part of your life, focusing in on all these things. So, and all the effort that you put in to give these leagues publicity and the players and everything is much appreciated. You're a valuable member of the community.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Well, I have my Bored Apes Football Club jersey on that was gifted by one of the listeners of the show. We have the commissioner of Fan Control Football, Ray Austin. How are you doing, sir?
Man, I am awesome. I am always awesome, man. I'm a part of Fan Control, so you cannot not be awesome, right?
Well, that's good. We have a long history. We had Patrick Dees back on many years ago. It feels like at this point talking, through all the coming out of 2020, and now you guys are entering into, starting tryouts, everything for season 3. How are you feeling about the state of Fan Control Football?
I mean, I couldn't be higher on how awesome the season went. The players that we had, I mean, it was everything I would have expected coming out of the pandemic. Atlanta was awesome. They were great for us and with us the whole ride. We've made some really great connections. We've got players that came in, moved on, and doing other things now. Some playing in other leagues, some playing in the NFL. So I look at that as the commissioner. And biggest thing is like having no serious issues or injuries. So as the commissioner, man, I look at that as a success last year.
It was the funniest thing. So we cover all the different leagues, right? We cover, the XFL, USFL. And I remember before Fan Control was kicking off and USFL, like they were still trying to figure out the rule book and people were like, is this even going to happen? Like, what's happening? And meanwhile, I look at Patrick's Twitter. You guys are building your entire arena and like setting up, and you're like we don't even like we're changing the whole game on this. I thought it's really ballsy, but everything you guys have ever tried to set out to do, I do feel like you've been successful.
Man, it's 10 years, man. Me and Grant was just on a call just a minute ago with an investor. We were like, man, we've been doing this for 10 years. Like, it don't even seem like it. And the amount of growth and the amount of friendships, relationships from our company to even fans. Like we've got fans working for us now. Like, how dope is that? Like, I couldn't be happier being a part of this organization because we've got some of the probably smartest people around it. And I love like when we put something out or we leak something out, we can because we know what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? We know what we're doing in the back end. And I think even our fans are starting to get it, So we got our show, the Fan Control show, in like an hour and a half. And the fans know we're going to give them a little bit. And then they're going to be like, all right, that's enough for now. We know they're out there working. And that's how it is. It takes the amount of time that it takes all the things that people forget. all that we're doing. That it's a pro sport league on top of technology, on top of this distribution, conglomerate we're building. It's incredible. And now we're going into fan control hoops, man. We're going into a whole nother sport now. And people always, all my friends and all my former teammates are always asking me like, man, what are you going to do in the XFL and the competition? I'm like, there's no competition. We're not competing with any of those leagues, and we are fan control sports. We will have multiple sports in the next 5 years that people can pick and choose what they want their fan control experience to be.
Well, I do, and I just got off my XFL interview. We had Mike Mitchell on this week talking all the the leagues and all that. XFL right now feels really not fun to me, right? Like we're like controlling this, and we've got Danny and Dwayne, and like what are we like? Where you guys, it always has felt way more like you said. We're bringing like Kyle and people bringing on to work for us, and we're having the show every week, and we're talking with our audience. It just feels like I think you guys get the niche that spring and alt football is, and it's like we're gonna dive into that and embrace those fans versus like, well, we are maybe a step above like that.
I think when people see any of these leagues, yeah. I think the blueprint is not changed. It's the same blueprint going into different multiple demographics, multiple locations, having teams in different smaller cities that possibly are not in NFL cities or college big cities, and it's the same blueprint. And it's just like we've always seen ourselves as sport in a box, and we've always seen ourselves as fan engaging. And the ultimate core of our product is what fans, period. That is the gasoline that makes this thing work. So we'll never change the dynamic of the sport from football, basketball, whatever we bring. We're just intensifying it with technology, period. And at the same time, literally asking our opinions and the comments and suggestions from our fans so we can build the right league. Man, I promise you, when we did it was the fan replay. I don't know if you remember the first fan replay. That shit blew my mind. It was like the way it happened, how it happened, and people don't even realize. Like me and Deez are in the booth with Greg, right? So and Grant are running around trying to figure it out, right? Because we was in the pandemic, so we couldn't go down. Everybody was in their own little bubbles, and it was just like, what do we do? We're texting and on the stream, and it's just like, fuck, let's just let the fans do it. And we didn't even have it. It wasn't even built out yet. And Steve Adler, our tech team, was just like, all right, we can do it. Let's do it. And literally did that right then, right there. And now that was one of my favorite. That's like one of my favorite moments of fan control. So yeah.
Well, and I do think with the nature of the Twitch and the live stream, and it does feel like these events, right? We're having these double headers of the games where we're bringing everyone. Like it does feel like you kind of live through that evening. I remember season 1, and you've got Marshawn on there, or Sherman, and maybe saying stuff they're not supposed to be saying, but it feels like it's part of this experience that. You're able to chat in and call in and do it. It feels like it's these tentpole events every weekend.
I kept telling everybody, listen, we need to stop calling this week 1 and week 2. We need to call this episode 3 and episode 4, because we didn't even know what was going to happen every week, right? Like we get on a call and it's like, yo, Antonio Brown's coming this week. Oh, what? All right, what do we do? And it was literally like that majority of the year. So we never knew what was going to happen, which made it great for us. Made it great for the fans. It really made a great experience for the fans inside the venue. I think a lot of our fans, just like most in pro sports, maybe 1 or 2% actually get a chance to watch their football team in an actual stadium. When you come to fan control, it's completely different. And I wish every fan had the ability to come and see how that venue is and how interactive it is. It's just, and again, you got Antonio Brown and Johnny Manziel and, all these people just walking around having fun and just being engaged with the fans. It just takes all the walls down from professional sports. If you think about professional sports, is executives, wall, players, wall, fans, wall. You know what I'm saying? We up in the suites. I'm sitting with the Bored Ape dudes and the Glacier Boy guys with Devin Cook and Marshawn over there. Like it's an experience that can't be duplicated like we've done it.
How big was it for you guys to be able to get into your own arena? I can't remember what the name of it. The venue for season 2, right? I assume carried on for there, but to get, obviously season 1 COVID and all that, and there were just restrictions that could be. But how cool was it to be able to kind of sell seats, bring fans in, and have all that engagement?
Well, number one, fans in seats have never been our business model, right? So it wasn't about having a ton of fans being at our venue. We wanted the fans that came to our venue to feel important, to feel valued, feel like a different experience. So we wanted to build it like that. And so when we was at the pandemic, we was at Infinite Energy Arena. Yeah, it was big, and it was just, it was the same shit. Everybody all spread out and all that, and we couldn't have had fans in there. If we would have, it would have been the same thing. And so we've always had this idea. We've always said, man, we're gonna get this arena. We wanted to be like, y'all. You ever see the movie Real Steel with Hugh Jackman?
Yeah.
And like when they was trying to get to the championship, he was boxing at all these other places, and he was going to these dungeon ass places where it was still very tech and innovative, but it was kind of rustic. We always said that's what we wanted. And so when Puma Yards came up, we was like, it was like, this is it. It was like perfect. Plus, they shot so many movies there, from the Virgin and Bad Boys, Game of the game, what's the one where they looking for food? They're fighting for food.
Oh, Hunger Games.
They all those movies were like shot there. And when you walk in, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can see it. And it was just such this it was this rustic like Armageddon, meets innovation place. And it was literally, it was perfect for us.
So obviously now coming into season 3, you went from 4 to 8. We're running back 8 teams again this year. Is that the plan?
Maybe.
Oh, that's exciting.
Maybe. Look, we're going to always think about expanding. That's always going to be the top of our head. So we always want new fans, old fans, always having those rivalries. So we'll definitely be expanding to new teams. But again, we're working on different sports as well. Hoops right now, man, you guys are going to be when you guys see what we are doing, I cannot wait. I just got some video from D's earlier, what we all did earlier this morning. It's bananas.
Well, and I like it, and I don't know, like I've heard there's a long rumored baseball too. Like I don't know what's all official, whatever yet, but a lot of these, I will enjoy watching them because I'm so into football, and I might be a little bit more of a traditionalist from like I don't know, I think I'm softening, but like I don't know if I love the fifth down or whatever. But I do think some of these I'm like I can just watch it. Like I go watch hockey games, I'm just like that's great, or like go watch basketball. So I do think I like the LED board, I like all that, and incorporated in like the power ups and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what makes, again, we don't change the pureness of football, basketball. Hoops still the same, the court's still the same, but we wanted to gamify for our fans so that you feel like this is an actual video game. So, and just speaking of that, man, I think the thing that we did so well, the fans did so well, us as a football ops did really well, was find really good talent. And if you think about anything and everything that we did, nobody would have watched our games if the talent wasn't good. Let's just be real. And so now that we're going into basketball, we're going to have that same mindset. If you think about the people that we're bringing on, from Ryan Blake, NBA scout, and you got Mike Beebe, you got Barron, and we've got some others that we're not announcing yet. But we're trying to do the same thing like we did with football. Surround ourselves with good talent, bring in other talent that's been there and done that, and you mix that together, man. You got a really pure quality sporting experience to watch.
Speaking of just talent, and obviously, not talking too much other leagues, but you have someone like Kevontae Turpin, right? Part of you guys, and goes on, success, plays in Europe, plays in the USFL now, is, killing it for the Cowboys, right? Really the only USFL guy, and I know there were injuries and stuff, but that stuck to, how cool is it to know that you guys were part of that and helping to kind of find some of this talent?
It is my biggest, it chokes me up because I know you're always trying to tell that story, and if you tell that story to all the players, you sound like it's not real, right? And you're always talking about, hey man, you got to work your way, you got to do whatever it takes, you got to play in these other leagues, you got to go make tape. You always say those things, and then at the end of the season, nobody gets a call. Then they're like, well, what the hell? Well, then we've been in business for 3 years, pretty much 2 seasons underneath our belt, and we've already got 3 NFL players that have been on NFL rosters. Like, to me, that's one of the biggest things that I love about what we do, that we're giving guys another chance. One, but there's something that we've done that people don't know. When we were in the pandemic, we couldn't get to guys. And I know it was tough for guys being in the hotel. So we really focus on the more than the athlete brand, like really trying to put players in a position to do. Hey, football was, I only played in the league for a few years. You know what I'm saying? At some point in your life, it's going to change. Make this place a platform that you can go and do something else from it. And we've gotten some success stories doing that. And now, going into season 3 and season 4 and beyond, now we really want to focus on that. So we have a program called Whole Athlete that we're going to focus on helping players not only in making it to the league, but also if they're entrepreneurs, actors, content creators, whatever that is in our wheelhouse, we want to help those guys succeed.
How going into season 3 here, how are you guys looking to make the next step up in terms of what you guys are putting out?
Putting out as you meaning player?
You know, I mean, like I said, going from 4 to 18s, but last year it was like we're in the arena, we've got the teams, and we've got NFTs, and we've got new owners and all that stuff. Like, what's the next?
That's a great question. One thing I don't know, I know a lot of you, the Web3 space is going to be big for us. We are really focused. I'm just being very, very blunt. We're really focusing on that Web3 space, bringing the real life and utility together. We always called ourselves URL and IRL, bringing those two together. And I think that's the space that we feel comfortable in. Look, do we know where that's at right now? I don't think anybody really does. Everybody's really still trying to figure it out. But the fact that we are actually in that space right now, really, really, it excites me, because I know that we're at the edge of technology, and also that we want to focus on maybe possibly having our own token out there, and all those things. Having our own, we want this place, our league, to be a community, whether it's through networking, community, you buying in, being an owner, you being a coach or scout, you picking the music, whatever it is. We just want to be able to do that. So I think we did a great job as a foundation. I think we just want to grow off of that. I think the thing that a lot of startups do, and we've even had this issue, growing too fast or growing too much or growing in too many different directions. Instead, I can honestly say we have a really great group of people that are keeping us, stationary and saying, hey, let's focus on this before we grow too big. Let's go from 4 to 8 to 10. Then back, and same thing with basketball, same thing with baseball, and just grow into this instead of just completely pushing the envelope.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. Moving forward here, I know we have tryout dates and stuff. Like, what are the next kind of steps here heading into season 3?
Yeah, so tryout dates are crazy because we're doing something that's never been done, and I'm still kind of freaking out about it. But since football is going to be colliding with basketball, we're going to, once basketball be finishing, football will be beginning. So we still got to stay on point and stay with recruiting and scouting. So we're doing something never been done before. We're doing our football tryouts and basketball tryouts in the same city in the same weekend. So Saturday will be football, Sunday will be basketball, and our first city will be Chicago. November the 30th. October the 30th, and Houston will be November the 13th. Los Angeles, December the 11th, and Atlanta will be our last one, January the 8th. And again, we're looking for football and basketball athletes. So Saturday will be the football ops, and then Sunday we'll have our basketball ops there.
And at least I know with Fan Control, you're doing where you can earn a spot onto one of the roster or one of the training camps, right? If you're through the tryout.
Yeah, so we had we had a really that was a really good segment with NBCLX. We allowed the last roster spot to be picked for the football teams, and it was awesome. And actually, two of those players did really well in the league that year. So we're going to do the same thing with basketball. Once we start getting the players, the amount of players that we want to look at, we'll have that one. When the draft goes, we'll have those groups of players that, some of the, fans say, man, I like him. I like his height. I like his way he shoots. He seems like a leader. We're going to put that same type of segment out for the fans to make that last decision.
Well, Brad, I really appreciate your time today coming on, and Brian and the team and everyone setting this up. So thank you so much. I think a lot of the fans are excited, and especially obviously with the other sports happening. But I do think that you guys have really carved out a niche here in the all football space. It's cool. I mean, we've been there since the beginning, kind of tracking it along, and so I think it's a pretty cool space you guys have.
I think it is. I think that's the cool thing is I love hearing it from you guys, because you guys are going to tell us what we're doing wrong, which is great. So it's just like it's perfect. It's a perfect business.
Well, Ray Austin, Commissioner of Fan Control Football, thank you so much. Hope to have you on here again in years to come. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And if anybody hasn't seen his content with his wedding stuff, dude. I was like, let me look at this guy, man, dude. Your content is dope, bro. Like, I love it, dude.
Well, I appreciate it. Allows me, doing the wedding, because everyone's like, why the hell can this guy be around all day to interview all day? I'm like, because I work weekends and I work a lot during the summer. So then my whole schedule in the fall and winter is set to talk about.
Because I really kind of scrolled the email real quick, and then I went straight to your content, and I went to your YouTube and I checked out your videos, man. I was like, you're sharp, man. Your stuff looks really great. So wow.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. We'll take care.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks.
Well, I'm trying to think. I think it's been about a year since we had this guest on, Scott Radley, with the Spectator columnist and hosts, obviously, your radio show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. In that year, we actually bumped into each other at the Grey Cup. It was standing in line to get media credentials. There was Reed, all, very professional.
Made it happen. People, there were a lot of doubts, we're back. We have our flights booked for Regina, so we'll be there. And I don't know if the BC Lions will be there, but we'll certainly be there having fun with my wife. How, Hamilton, the last week, when you were on the show, Hamilton on top of the world, right? Back-to-back Grey Cup appearances now. Struggling on the bye week. Thoughts on Hamilton this year?
Struggling? You're kind. You are the kindest guy. Struggling? Oh man, struggling is the nicest. You're a really nice guy. They have been awful, and I mean they have had their moments. That win against Winnipeg was. You looked and you said, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, wow, maybe this is the moment. This is. It's all been, but now all of a sudden something got figured out, and now they're gonna just roll. And even though they're. What were they at the time? 3-9, I think. Well, I'm just looking it up right now. They're 4-10, so they were 3-9, something like that. And then no team in any league that is 3-9 should even be talking about a possibility of playoffs. We can talk about this in a second about the CFL's playoff situation, but nonetheless, somehow you think, here we go. They figured it out. Winnipeg was the magical elixir, and they are going to roll into the playoffs now, and they're going to be, playing like this. They're going to beat Toronto. They're going to get to the Grey Cup. And then, no. Then last week, they're back at their usual, for this year anyway, their usual stuff. I think Ticat fans are, well, they all look like me now because they've pulled out whatever hair they had trying to figure this team out.
I mean, it's just I don't know. End of last season coming in, and they go, okay, we're getting rid of Mazzoli. Dane Evans is our guy. I like Dane Evans. Is it the Dane Evans fault, or is it just that they can't protect him and there's too much other stuff going on?
Well, let's be honest. Dane Evans has not been great a lot of this year. And, there's part of this story that I do wonder about. And I'm just blowing smoke at this point, but there are certain athletes in any sport, whether it's a goalie in hockey or a quarterback in football, whatever, who sometimes do better when there is a clear competition, when they know their job is not theirs. And I don't know if Dane Evans is that guy, but when Mazzoli was here last year, Dane Evans, when he got the chance to come in, was great. And you take Mazzoli now out of the mix, and there's nobody else in Hamilton that you look at right now and say, that guy for sure is the guy who will take Dane Evans' job away. And I don't know if that's got anything to do with it, but there are athletes for whom that's real. And I wondered about that at times this year, because Dane Evans has not looked like the same guy that was in when Mazzoli was hurt. And a lot of it seems to be decisions and bad throws. And I mean, physically, he's had some injuries, but physically, I think we haven't heard anything that says that he's had a shoulder problem or an elbow problem or anything. It seems to be mostly there. And so that's been a problem, but there are obviously other factors, but clearly Evans is not the same quarterback he was last year.
Is this something going into the off season that are we revamping, coaching staffs there and stuff? I mean, we saw Montreal so quick to kind of pull the plug, and I know there was a lot of, circumstances with that, but like, do we see any, large scale changes after the season?
There have been those who did say when Kahari Jones got let go from Montreal and landed in Hamilton as an advisor that, here's the future coach in waiting now getting into the system. I'll be shocked if Orlando Steinauer was let go. There's no way they're firing him. And with reason. I mean, the Ticats have been a crappy, terrible second half team this year. And some of that comes to coaching and adjustments and things like that. They've been horrible in the second half. But I also don't think, like a lot of people, you forget how to coach overnight. I don't think that Orlando Steinauer got the team to a bunch of Grey Cups and then woke up at the beginning of this year and went, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, he still is a good coach. He's made some mistakes. I'm sure if you asked him, he would say there's things that he would have done differently, but I don't see any likelihood that Orlando, unless he pulls the plug himself and, goes to a college team in the States or something, I don't see any way he's not back here next year. That to me is implausible. So they're going to work it, I think, with him still here.
And just try to revamp whatever. Because this season feels like, are they for sure eliminated yet? I know the CFL playoffs. No, it's like everyone can kind of.
No, it's tough. So here's the situation: Toronto, they can't catch Toronto now. Montreal, they're 2 wins behind, but Montreal has the tiebreaker, so really they're 3 wins behind. So to get them, you're going to have to win at least 3 of your last 4, assuming Montreal loses all of their last games. And your real thing here is to try and get 2 more wins in Saskatchewan and prevent the crossover and then squeak your way in that way. But that really means that it's going to come down to the next game when Hamilton plays Saskatchewan. If Saskatchewan wins that game, it is all but mathematically over. Hamilton, it is not mathematically a must-win game, but for all intents and purposes, this is a must-win game. You can't let Saskatchewan beat you if you really want to prevent that crossover.
It is interesting. You see some of now that all this, the playoff clinching and all that, and it's like, well, if Ottawa, ran the table and they won the next 8, and you're like, okay, but realistically, so headed into the offseason, what does Hamilton do then? Because here, to make it to the Grey Cup, back-to-back, not win, now feeling like the season is lost. I just don't know what the fan base there is looking for. And
with the Grey Cup coming back here next year. We've already got ads playing, commercials playing, selling Grey Cup tickets. They have to figure it out. And I don't know, maybe you inside the coach's office and the manager's office and everything else, you sit there and you say, that play there changes this game and that play changes this game. And maybe we're really not that far away from where we were last year and an injury here. Maybe you do that. And look, they were in overtime in the Grey Cup last year away from winning the championship. So they were a good team last year. Maybe you bank on Winnipeg not being the same next year. Now, I know they're not in the same division, but you start going through and you say, okay, well, that team's not going to be as good, and this Ottawa is still going to be bad, and we can still make the play. I don't know what you do, but they have some work to do, because we saw last year, you were there, having the home team in the Grey Cup changes it entirely. And having Hamilton in last year's Grey Cup made that work at a time when it really shouldn't because of COVID.
We just had, because CFL announced obviously this week Grey Cup sold out, and I was tweeting about it, and one of our listeners said, "Well, yeah, it's sold out until Saskatchewan's out of it, and then let's see how many of those tickets open up maybe on." Which it's a good point, because right now I didn't even think about that. That the Rough Riders are still conceivably could. I don't see them making it, but they could still conceivably make it. I mean, what do you make of that kind of just? Not collapse of a season, but really the Rough Riders, all I hear is drama and negativity surrounding them and the coach and everything else there.
Saskatchewan might be in a terrific place right now, honestly. I mean, ideally, of course, they'd want to be in first place. But if you are coming out of the West, which is by far the superior division, if you're the crossover team, you come here and you have to play Montreal in Montreal. Saskatchewan can beat Montreal. I wouldn't be... that would not be a massive upset for that to happen at all. In fact, they'd probably be favored, even if it was in Montreal. Then you've got to play the Argos. Yeah, you're still in Toronto. You're still in the East. But does anyone think Saskatchewan couldn't beat the Argos? And now you're in the Grey Cup at home. I mean, they have Saskatchewan has actually put themselves in a way easier path to get to the Grey Cup than they would have if they had finished one position higher. If they're in third, I'm with you. There's no chance they're beating Winnipeg. There's no chance they're probably beating BC. Probably no chance they're beating Calgary. They're out in all likelihood, I would think. But you come through the East, I think Saskatchewan has a very good chance of getting to the Grey Cup game at home.
If they played Montreal, though, they'd have to deal with the Horns. So that might might sway that might be that home field advantage there in Montreal now.
Look, it would. You wonder, would Montreal is not Montreal the way it was during the Anthony Calvillo years. Do you think does Montreal even sell out for a playoff game if it's not the division championship, if it's the first round game? Maybe they do, maybe. But again, I would, if I was Saskatchewan and I had a choice. If I'm Saskatchewan, I say, okay, I can play against BC in BC, which I think is a way better team than Montreal, or I can play Montreal in Montreal. I'm taking Montreal. And then if I have to play against Winnipeg to get to the Grey Cup or against the Argos to get to the Grey Cup, I'm taking the Argos 100 days out of 100. I would not, that Grey Cup being sold out in Regina, I don't think all those fans are idiots. I think they may actually be holding on to those tickets because there is a reasonable chance they're playing in that game.
That's exciting. Speaking of, Grey Cup and all this, BC Lions, our team, America's CFL team, as I call them, clinched, right? I got the big tweet, we clinched because Ottawa lost, I think, on Saturday. I had a wedding. I was filming the wedding, watching the game on my phone while we were filming Toast. I have one of those things that holds my phone up to it's very not for, but I'm watching the game and I've never felt less good about clinching a playoff win, watching the horrendous game that we had against Calgary. Thoughts on BC? Vernon came in. It was iffy kind of that first week, but we got it done. And now I do feel like it's full collapse.
So I remember the last time we talked about a year ago was around the time that Nathan Rourke was getting his first look by the BC Lions. If I remember, his name came up in our conversation. People can go back and find the thing, but I think we talked about Nathan Rourke. And I certainly, in a million years, I'm not going to claim that I thought Nathan Rourke would be what he was at the start of this year. I mean, he was way better than I thought he was going to be. If Nathan Rourke was still playing for BC right now and wasn't hurt, I don't know that I'm saying Winnipeg is an overwhelming favorite to win the West. He was that good, and it was stunning to me that he was as good as he was. Good for him. I mean, happy for the Canadian kid and all the rest. It's a great story. And at one time, I think, did they not at one time say Rourke could be maybe ready for the playoffs? I'm not banking on that. And even if you come back at this point, you've missed so much time. Are you really going to be able to pick up where you left off? But no, I'm with you. I think BC, any team now that has to go through Winnipeg has got in Winnipeg, in the winter with all that stuff, that's a tough way to get back to the Grey Cup.
I just, it saddens me, Vernon Adams, big fan favorite, he's been on the show, lives in Washington, from Washington, all this. And it just felt like everything was there for it to really work out. And they went on the road, but now it's like we've had like 3-4 weeks of practice. We're at home, we're doing everything. And it was just such a future game. I just finally had to turn it off and we were working. But is that the Vernon that kind of everyone expected? Or did you think he would maybe be better in this, elevated position here with a lot of talent around him?
How many games has he had with BC? I can't remember. Was that his first start?
They won on the road, Calgary, and he played, it was good. I mean, he had a couple issues and the big flip where he ran out of bounds and stuff. But then this week it was like, I felt like I was watching the Commanders again, where it's like we go scoreless in the first half. I mean, it was very, very scary.
Yeah, it takes time for guys to, I don't know. I'm not writing off Vernon Adams at this point yet, because I mean, he had some good moments with Montreal too, but I think, again, you're going to have to be in the West. You're going to have to be great to beat Winnipeg, I think, especially when you get to the playoffs. And I don't know what happened in that Hamilton game. They say that they took Hamilton seriously and they say that they, prepared and all the rest. Did they? I mean, did Winnipeg come into Hamilton looking at the two records? Because at that point, don't forget, Hamilton was actually in last place in the East. So you've got the first and the last place. Did they come in and go, this is our easy week, and get caught off guard because Hamilton played the best game of their life and Winnipeg played a bit of a stinker? I don't think you're catching Winnipeg flat again. The rest of this season and rolling into the playoffs and knowing they could go 3 in a row. And I mean, I think Edmonton would have been the last team to win 3 in a row. I'm thinking. I can't even remember. I haven't looked it up, I guess. You've got a chance to do something amazing. I don't think you're catching Edmonton flat again all season. So you're just, if that was the best Vernon Adams at this point you're going to get, you got problems. If there's room for growth there, maybe, but you're going to have to be really good. But let's go, if I can. I don't want to steal your leading here, but I do want to mention something I said. The fact that we have a 4-10 Hamilton Ticats team, and I don't want to get beat up by all the Hamilton fans, but a 4-10 Hamilton team and a 3-10 Ottawa team that are both still potentially in contention to get a playoff spot is an outrageous indictment of the CFL's current playoff system. It really is. And this is why I've been arguing, and I know people say, you can't say this is sacrilege. We don't need an East and a West anymore. We need a one-division league. East and West was terrific when the only things that tied this country together were the railway and CBC. That's not the case anymore. It's a big, small country, a small, big country, whichever way you want to do it, with the internet and everything else. I don't think that there is a single CFL fan that if we ended up with a BC Winnipeg Grey Cup would go, oh, crap, I'm not watching that because it's 2 teams from the West. Screw that. I'm from the East. I won't. No one's going to say that. Just as, honestly, truthfully, if Toronto and Hamilton one year ended up in the Grey Cup game, would people in the West say, oh, I refuse to watch that? If they were the 2 clearly best teams, I refuse to watch that because they're 2 from the East. I don't believe that. And I think it's outrageous that Edmonton right now is dead in the water because they stink, but they're dead in the water. And yet Hamilton and Ottawa that are the same as them are still battling potentially for a playoff spot. And I also think, and again, here's where people do lose their minds at when I say this, there is a phrase, and it's even an advertising campaign in the CFL. It says the CFL season doesn't really begin until Labor Day. Why is that a point of pride? Why am I an idiot fan then if I buy a ticket for a game in early August because the game doesn't really matter? If I was 0-8 on Labor Day in the East, I could still make the playoffs. That's not right. I'm not comparing to the NFL, but I was listening to analysts talk about the who are they talking about? The Raiders? Or one of the teams that was 0-3.
Raiders,
is their season already done? And I'm like, wait a second, you're 0-3 and they're already saying that your season is over? And meanwhile, we're 3-10 or 4-10. You're very much in the mix. Just win 1 or 2 games and something's got to be fixed. Because it just seems wrong that anybody could get in. Imagine if one of these teams gets up and gets even with Saskatchewan against the Cross. So Saskatchewan doesn't win another game. Hamilton or Ottawa gets to 6 wins. You're 6-12 and you go through and you win the Grey Cup. That's wrong. I'm sorry, that's wrong.
Well, but I think CFL fans look at this like, oh, it's so interesting. Winnipeg sucked forever, and then they got the spark at the end, or Hamilton or whatever. I mean, and with the NFL expanding now to 17 weeks, I mean, it's becoming closer to obviously CFL is still longer and more games, but like, it's not that dissimilar of, hey, one team's playing for 6 months and one team's playing for 2 months or whatever. I mean, it's expanding that out. I agree with you in the, even like with hockey and baseball, you get all these like, oh, it's the West Coast World Series or whatever. Like you get these things all the time where we have the different, divisions within the, like.
And that's going to happen. That's going to happen. But here's another example. All right. So let's say Montreal doesn't win another game this year. Well, somebody's going to have to. But let's say somehow Saskatchewan finishes 4th in the West, but they have a better record than Montreal as the second best team in the East. That's happened before. Saskatchewan still has to be the visiting team and come to Montreal. So Montreal, despite having a worse record, somehow just because of geography ends up with the home game. And we've seen this happen. So one division, right now, let's look at the one division. You've got Winnipeg and BC would get buys in the first round. And then you've got 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. Now you've got, if you don't wait till Labor Day for the season to start and you do what Winnipeg did and you pile up the wins, you get a benefit from that, a real tangible benefit. And as I say, I just don't believe anymore that the East-West thing matters that significantly to fans. I would much rather see the 2 top teams, wherever they're from, end up in the Grey Cup, period.
Well, and it's almost a joke, just where the 4 East, like, it's been so bad,
There's never been an Eastern crossover, never. Never.
I don't know. I feel like you and many have come on here and said that, or I've read, or I just don't understand like the rationale behind it. What's holding that up, right? Is that a board of governors thing? And they're like, well, we don't really want to jeopardize, being able to like, we get paid more if we host. Like, I don't want to. I mean, that's got to be part of it, right?
Well, if you're the Eastern teams, and as I say, there's never been an Eastern crossover, and for whatever reason that is, the Western Division almost always is superior. If you're the Eastern teams, do you want to vote to potentially put yourself in a position where your teams are not making the playoffs or you don't get that home game? Like, if you were to vote today and Montreal was, and we were to go to that, and so to vote today to implement immediately, is Montreal going to vote to give up their potential home playoff game? No, not in a million years. So, but I think, as I say, I think that the league, some will argue, some will say, no, the league's got plenty of credibility. It's got 100 and whatever years of credibility, which it does. But I think that it's not a credible playoff situation sometimes when you're playing around with things that give home field to teams that don't deserve it, or put teams in that don't deserve it, or create matchups that are way more difficult just because you're in a different conference. You should benefit for doing well during the season.
Well, especially the disparity of playing climates in a lot of these home stadiums, right? I mean, Winnipeg home game is very different than a Toronto home game.
Absolutely, yeah, no kidding. Saskatchewan. I mean, I wasn't there, but I remember watching the last Grey Cup when Hamilton played in Saskatchewan in 2013, I think it was. Watching that and talking to people who were there. There was in no one's mind was there a thought that Hamilton had a chance to win that game. The environment, the whole thing, everybody knew from the moment that ball was kicked off, Saskatchewan was winning that game, and they did. They smoked them. There's a huge advantage to some of these things, and so you think that, again, going back to my example, if we end up with Montreal and Saskatchewan tied, and they have the crossover, and Saskatchewan has to come to Montreal, you think Saskatchewan doesn't lose out by the fact that they're playing in Montreal, not just because they're playing in Montreal, but because they don't have that home field advantage? It's huge. It's huge.
Rounding out the conversation before I let you go, talking West, right? Winnipeg, king of the world over there. It's almost kind of boring at this point, right? Calgary coming up strong. Do you see Calgary as maybe that number? I don't even care what the records say, but I mean, do you see Calgary as the second best team in the West right now?
Probably. But let me ask you, I mean, as a BC fan, has Winnipeg achieved Yankees maybe Red Sox, have they achieved that status yet that they've won so much that everybody hates them?
Yeah,
I don't get the feeling. Do you think so?
I hate Winnipeg. Yeah, my wife.
I don't know that they've reached that yet, but they're probably getting close if they haven't already. That, okay, you've won enough. We're done with you. We'd like anybody to be. I don't know if they're there yet, because everyone likes Zach Collaros, Mike O'Shea. Unless you're in Hamilton, he seems okay to people. I don't know.
I just, as everyone here knows, we are new covering the CFL and being a part of this. And I don't know a world where Winnipeg and Zach Collaros, everyone's talking oh, well, Collaros wasn't even that good, when he came in and it was late in the season. I missed, Zach Collaros is the king of the CFL as far as my whole life purview here. So.
Yeah. And part of the problem is, as far as turning them into the Darth Vaders of the CFL, is Zach Collaros is a nice guy. He comes across as a good guy. He's a tough guy to really hate. There could be guys on that team that you don't like so much. And as I say, certainly Hamilton fans going back long into history have a real hate for Mike O'Shea, but that's got nothing to do with his coaching in Winnipeg. I don't know if they've reached that yet, but they win again this year. One of two things happens. Either you suddenly have a generation of people who go, we haven't seen one of these dynasties in a long time. It's kind of fun to see a team do this. Or everybody is like, somebody please beat Winnipeg, knock them off their perch. We're tired of Winnipeg.
Well, it says a lot that, even with Rourke and everything and all that, we still lost to Winnipeg. The BC Lions back at their peak still lost. So that tells you that, I would be scared. Rourke, Vernon, or other, Michael O'Connor in there, I would be scared going into Winnipeg in any way right now.
I am so disappointed this year that Rourke got hurt, because I think that he was writing, and you're the BC fan, not as a fan, he was writing such an amazing story about Canadian football. And I think the way he was playing, assuming he was incrementally getting better, he had a chance to do something that was, I hate the word, but magical. I don't know what other word you could use for a Canadian quarterback in a league that has struggled to find good Canadian quarterbacks. He was setting up something spectacular. And it was like, when he got hurt, it was like, oh, well, maybe next year, if he doesn't get hurt, maybe he comes back and but the one other question, and I don't know, do people in BC ask that, does Nathan Rourke, when he's healthy, if he comes back and does this again, is there an NFL team that says, hey, you know what? He played college in the States. Maybe we missed him. Is there an NFL team that says, come down and throw the ball? Let's see how it goes. I wouldn't be shocked.
It was funny. I was looking because as an American CFL fan, incredibly difficult to get merchandise. And so I go on the BC Lions store and I'm trying to buy other hats, and everything's sold out. I assume you kind of just got to be at the stadium and buy it, kind of thing. So I'm emailing them. I'm like, hey guys, trying to buy some stuff. And they're like, oh, we're just, with Nathan Rourke, it's just so popular right now. And we just don't even have any of this merchandise. I'm like, I would curious what the merch sales are right now after the last couple of weeks. I'm just saying that I think they were riding the high there, and now it's certainly disappointing. But Nathan was walking on the field, so he's certainly around.
It's as I say, he is a guy who I've gotten to know. Russ Jackson over the years, local guy, greatest Canadian quarterback ever. And we started, I think it was way too early, way premature. Nonetheless, we started hearing the name Russ Jackson rumbled out there a little bit with what Nathan was doing. And as I say, I think that's an unfair thing to Nathan Rourke to start dropping Russ Jackson's name in yet. You're in your first year as a starter. That's too much too fast. But it had been that long since there had been a Canadian quarterback who was a real, true, legitimate star in this league. And that's what he was doing. And I really hope that even if the NFL does come calling, I hope we get a full year somewhere of Nathan Rourke before that happens, so we get to see what he could do, because I think he could be that good.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate your time today. I promise we won't hopefully keep it a year since we bring you back on.
Every Grey Cup edition.
Yeah, every Grey Cup. We'll see. I don't. Will you be making the trek out or not if Hamilton being out of the Grey Cup?
My colleague Steve Milton will probably be going, and you know what? Look, you say with Hamilton out, Hamilton's not out yet. I realize that may sound like I have been dropped on my head once too many times, but that's, there is still a chance. It's like Dumb and Dumber. You're saying there's a chance. I don't think so, but there's a chance. We'll see.
My wife knows Steve Milton is the man with the beautiful hair, which neither of us have. So that'll be good. We'll connect with Steve at some
Steve,
point.
I did a lookalike with Steve a while back. I sent him this. Steve and Estelle Getty from the Golden Girls. They're starting to look a little. Look it up. You'll see.
That's good. Well, Scott, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it and your flexibility coming on this week. It means a lot. So thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks.
Thanks to all of our guests today. Really appreciate, Mike Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell coming in, therapy session, talking us through all this. Mike, I'm recording this after, before I've talked with Mike. So I hope that we were able to keep everything even keel. Maybe we just totally went off the rocker and this isn't even going to make sense now, but really appreciate Mike stopping by today, extended time. I would have Mike on every month if he would have me. It's one of those, like, how often do we do it before it becomes like, we want to keep it special. So I don't know. You tell me, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. Ray Austin, like I said, everyone over at Fan Control Football, really excited for that. I think they're doing some cool stuff with the Fan Control Sports. I really like the rumored Fan Control Baseball that would be coming. I think that is really exciting as well. I like all that stuff because I think it's further away from football. So I can just watch as like a casual. I don't have to be like, well, why are they going for the fifth down? And like, I can just watch. I think that is really good. And then, like I said, Scott Radley coming on. Hopefully here, big week next week. We've tried this before. We will try it again. I have to work on Wednesday. Hopefully the announcement would come earlier in the day. Could maybe do live hit earlier or later. I work midday, like 10 to 2 Pacific. So knowing my luck, the announcement will come right at 9 a.m. right as I'm heading out the door. But we will see. Hopefully those team names coming next week, all the events and all of that stuff. Like I said, huge guest 2 weeks from now, the week of October 10th. So what is that, 2 weeks? I think my math is right on that. Really appreciate all your support. 2 weeks. Really appreciate all your support. Everyone checking out the show. Like and subscribe. Thanks, Mike, Ray, Brian over at FCF, and Scott for coming on today. Thank you all so much. Take care. Have a good weekend. Thanks.